Palo says President Bongbong Marcos has secured investment pledges from various companies amid his official visit to the United States. Among them, pharmaceutical giant Moderna, which wants to set up a vaccine-making facility in the country. Malacanang says this will become Moderna's only shared service facility in Asia. Solar firm Maxion is eyeing a multi-billion expansion of operations in the country. Healthcare services provider Optum and business process outsourcing company Atento also plan to invest in the local BPO industry. Let's now get the thoughts of Michael Bociurkiw, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. He joins us now from Odesa, Ukraine. Michael, great to have you with us. How significant is this U.S. trip of the Philippine president in securing greater economic and political engagement?
Sure, Mabuhay, good to be with you, Rico. Well, listen, what a head turner this visit was. Who would have thought, even a year ago that Marcos would be back in the White House visiting the United States? But here we go, he made it. There were no serious gaps. And, looking at the list of accomplishments, pretty impressive. Bilateral defense guidelines, transfer of military assets to the Philippines Armed Forces, including helicopters and patrol vessels, and also development of the bases and the areas around the bases. This is really, really important because, as you know, I was in the Philippines around the time when the bases were handed back, and you could see during that whole time that the areas around Clark and Subic really didn't benefit that much from the presence of those bases. And the withdrawal, of course, was also hectic in part because of Mount Pinatubo eruption. But still, I think it's going to be really important as follow-up to this agreement that the Philippines press for economic development, debt forgiveness, that sort of thing, because poverty alleviation, very important, the battle against corruption, and also security guarantees. So I think, Rico, to end up on this, I think that's really important why defense was near the top of the agenda, because
so, Michael,
we're looking at a very, very aggressive China right now, not only in Southeast Asia, but around the world. Important for the Philippines to secure ironclad security guarantees from the United States.
So, Michael, how much stronger is this alliance now between the United States and the Philippines with the president's visit, now that you have trade missions being organized, more military collaboration, investment pledges and investments?
Yeah, well, let's not make any mistake here. I mean, state visits like that are very symbolic. We have a very divided Washington right now. It's almost an understatement. So whatever the president agrees to probably needs congressional approval. It's a very divided politically Washington right now, even on big issues like the war in Ukraine. So, people shouldn't get too ahead of themselves. But it's good to see a Filipino president back in the United States, despite all of the controversy behind the Marcoses. Duterte, with all due respect, was seen as mostly a buffoon in Washington and at their Western capitals. So this elevates the Philippines onto a new level, thank goodness.
How do you think China will view now this stronger alliance between the United States and the Philippines and this visit of President Marcos to the White House and meeting Joe Biden?
Yeah, well, they won't be happy. They'll probably respond with bluster. They'll probably respond with threats, like they do, for example, when U.S. Officials visit Taiwan. So the Philippines needs to be prepared for that. But, it really pains me, having lived in the Philippines so long, having covered it, to see China's aggressive actions in the West Philippine Sea, building of new islands, bases, so-called tourist resorts. The Southeast Asian countries by themselves cannot stand back against this aggression themselves. They need a strong partner like the United States, and it's good in a way to see the United States honor its commitment of leaving the quicksands of the Middle East to Asia Pacific, where it has really significant interests.
You are now in Ukraine. Will this conflict there be ever resolved? You have the Chinese siding with the Russians who have invaded Ukraine, the Philippines and the United States, allies who want this war stopped sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, first of all, just before I came on air with you, I spoke with the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Ukraine, and he said the Philippines really deserves a lot of applause for backing Ukraine. They described the Philippines as their strongest partner in Southeast Asia. And I also noticed there's an agreement to establish a Ukrainian embassy in Manila. And also what has happened, there was the first call ever between the president of the Philippines and the president of Ukraine last February. And in the United Nations, Manila has backed no less than 5 UN resolutions supporting the territorial integrity of Ukraine, sovereignty, and its political independence. So, but having said all that, I mean, what Ukraine needs right now is everything it's asking for militarily, Rico, and that includes the ability to close its skies to incoming Russian rockets, which, by the way, have come this direction as well, but also to push Mr. Putin back as far as possible. One more quick thing, Rico, you know, a lot of people in the world think that this is not their war. Well, unfortunately, it is, because if Mr. Putin and Russia is not pushed back, they will continue with their election meddling, with their cyber warfare, hybrid warfare, their real war against the rules-based international order of which the Philippines is a part of. And lastly, if the Russians continue to block exports of things like Ukrainian wheat and sunflower oil, that sort of thing, that affects the grocery bills of everyone, including right there in the Philippines.
And because of this war in Ukraine, definitely it has impacted global economics with inflation, with higher interest rates. Thank you so much for your insights and for joining us. Michael Bociurkiw, Global Affairs Analyst, joining us from Odesa, Ukraine.